fire. The grubs then, when mixed with the cocoa beans and pounded with a clean stick, turned into paste, which, if you squinted and were of an optimistic temperament, looked like flour and water. "Now, we just make a fire and cook them," said Fred. "Just," said Con. "We need a flint," said Fred. "We need kindling," said Leela. "And matches," said Con. "I'll do the kindling," said Fred. Most of the wood surrounding them had dried since the rain the night before. He held the hem of his cricket jumper in his teeth and made a hammock for the wood. The night of the jungle had not improved the taste of the wool. He came back to the clearing and tipped the wood into a pile, a few paces away from the den. "There are flints in there," said Leela. "We could rub away the moss and use them to make sparks. Flints don't go off." "Flints aren't enough to be them by themselves," said Fred. "I've tried. You need a bit of steel." Leela ducked into the den and fetched a flint. Con was staring at Leela's watch. What's that made of?" Fred stared down at the watch, covering it protectively with his hand. "Glass and steel," he said. "My father gave it to me when I went to boarding school." "But it's broken," said Con. "I know that," he said. "So," said Con, "if it's broken, it's not really a watch anymore, is it?" "But what is it? Is it a lump of steel?" Fred jerked his hand back. His father never bought his birthday gifts. He left it to his secretary to take Fred to Harrods and pick out something sensible. This was the only gift Fred could remember his father choosing himself. He had to engrave with Fred's initials. Leela nodded. "It might be the only way," she said. Her voice had sympathy in it, but grit to it. "Fine," he said. He had an unaccountable, absurd need to cry. "Fine, we'll use it." "Can I have first try?" said Con. "It's my watch." "I know, but I've never lit a fire before," she said. "Not even the ones in the fireplace at home." "Not even bonfire night?" Fred asked. "Not allowed." There was longing and hunger in her eyes. She looked away from him, turning the flint over and over in her hand, as if it was jewel. But there was something written on her face. Fred thought in code he couldn't begin to read. Here, slowly, he undid the strap. He held the watch in his fist, surreptitiously tracing the letters on the back of his thumb. Con watched in silence. He put it in her palm. I get second go. Leela heaped shredded leaves and dried grass in the pile. "You do it over that," she said, "so the sparks has something to catch." Con struck the back of the watch against the stone. Fred winced. She overshot and dug the flint into her own skin. She said nothing and tried again. She bit down on her tongue, concentrating. Her eyebrows furrowed so deeply that they nudged against her eyelashes, striking and striking until her fingers were raw. Suddenly, flint and steel let off a tiny spark. Con was so stunned she fumbled the flint. "Again!" Max shrieked. Max. Again! The spark came again, a brief flare into the world that flashed as it came. "It needs to be lower over the kindling," said Leela. Con struck again and again. The spark caught against a blade of grass, which caught against another. Fred's heart leaped, and he dropped to his stomach and blew the scrap of fire. Terrified he would blow it out, the flame faltered. No, don't die," said Con. Leela had added a handful of dry moss. Fred blew again. The fire seemed to breathe in, then exhaled a cough of flames. Max whooped. Leela held out a sheaf of twigs. The fire caught at them, made 5 burning fingers, ate them hole. It bounced upwards. More, said Max, and was dancing in tight circles, slapping his ribs. Feed it more. Fred added a handful of bone-dry leaves, and then another, and another. The fire made a noise like an idea being born, a crackle that sounded like hope and sent up a column of flames. They all rocked back at their ankles, grinning at each other. We could sleep in shifts, said Con, to make sure it doesn't go out. She looked at the fire with potential pride. We made it, by ourselves. Fred put the watch quietly in his pocket. It was scratched now, deeply dented, but inside his pocket he clutched it so tightly and dug a circular bruise into his palm. It's the most beautiful fire I have ever seen, said Leela. Yes, said Con, by far. Max bit lightly in Leela's arm. Can we eat now? I'm so hungry. I might die. Fred scrabbled in the dust with his nails until he found a flat stone and balanced it, wobbling dangerously on 4 green wood sticks over the centre of the flames. Leela divided the grub paste into 4 balls and spread them on the stone. Eventually the pancakes began to bubble. Leela poked them. They're getting harder, she said. And they smell like shoes, said Con. That probably means they're done. One of the trees near the den had vast fleshy leaves as big as serving dishes. Fred pulled 4 of them and dropped a grub pancake on to each one. They were hot to the touch and gooey. They're probably best while they're so hot. You can't taste them, said Fred. He bit off half the pancake, trying not to chew much. It tasted disconsolately animal. It was, he thought, like eating porridge mixed with fingernail grime, but it was better, wildly, indefinitely better than nothing. Con nibbled the corners of hers. She grimaced, but she didn't spit out. To be honest, it's not that much worse than school dinner, she said, and she smiled, half a smile. Max kept his food scrunched in his fist, guarding it from the others. I don't like sharing, he said. His pancake oozed out from between his fingers. The clearing was growing darker every minute. Kong stood. I'm going to use she hesitated and coloured, the lavatory, so don't come over there, or look around, or I'll punch you. She paused. Please? We could decide on a place, said Fred, quite far off, and then we could mark a path, and nobody would get lost. They got up, all 4 of them standing close together in the gathering dark, and began looking for a suitably large tree, far enough from their fire, but not far enough for them to risk getting lost. This one's big, said Fred. And this one, said Con. The trees were immense, stretching at least as high as a church. We could make that one the boys' toilet, and this one the girls', said Con. Leela's smile was sudden and enormous. It showed that one of her teeth were wonky, and she had a dimple in her cheek. We could call it Lava Tree. It wasn't terribly funny, but once Fred started laughing, he couldn't stop. Con choked and had to bite her fist. Max's laughter sent a ribbon of snot flying into the glade. They laughed so loudly enough to scare the birds, make the distant monkeys roar angrily from their night perches in the trees.